right, Matt, this is one of the fights that I know we're both looking forward to most on UFC 249 coming at us May 9th, and it's a fight that wasn't originally scheduled on the April 18th iteration of the card because this is a rematch from 2013. It was a #1 title eliminator between Anthony Pettis and Donald Cerrone. Back then, it was Anthony Pettis getting a convincing first-round TKO victory over Cerrone. It was a crisp body kicks, able to get the win there. Now, Matt, this is 7+ years later. It's kind of crazy to think about it. This fight taking place, of course, at welterweight. Anthony Pettis ranked 15th in the division. Donald Cowboy Cerrone still ranked 6th at lightweight. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. Losses to Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, and in his last one to Conor McGregor. Now that one, of course, at 170 pounds. For Anthony Pettis, he's lost his last 2 to Nate Diaz and Carlos Diego Ferreira. So you really have to wash away everything. The one other thing I will say, the last time Donald Cerrone lost 3 fights in a row, he lost to Jorge Masvidal, Robbie Lawler, and Darren Till. He came out in his next fight and got a win over Yancy Barros.
This just has to be said. Whether you like Cowboy or not, his career's insane. He's only lost and beat the best in the world, and that's been it.
So, Cowboy Cerrone, after he lost to Anthony Pettis in 2013, would beat KJ Noons, then he'd lose to Rafael dos Anjos, then he went on an absolute heater. And in the span of about 2 years, he fought 10 times, just kept winning, went 9-1, beat John McDessie, then ended up fighting Rafael dos Anjos for the belt in 2015 and lost that fight. But realistically, in this one, none of that has any bearing. You have 2 guys on losing streaks, 2 all-time fighters. Of course, Anthony Pettis, your former lightweight champ in the UFC and in WEC. Donald Cerrone's fought some of the best at his peak, in his prime, and I mean, at this point in his career, he's 37 years old. Both guys, too, kind of bouncing between divisions, lightweight and welterweight. What do you expect in this one here?
I expect a really fun fight. I do. It's just really hard for me to pick Cowboy because of the amount of damage he's taken in his career. Those names that you just listed, it's impossible to fight Jorge Masvidal, win or loss, and not take damage. And he lost by knockout, and he pretty much got knocked out twice. I don't know if you remember. He got dropped at the end of the first round and then knocked out in the second round. The Tony Ferguson fight stands out in my mind. I know Ferguson had that one late shot, but that second round is the best Tony Ferguson we've ever seen. And what he was able to do to Donald didn't really hit him with many strikes. Ferguson was able to move out of the way of a lot of it. And then, of course, the Gaethje knockout loss, and then the McGregor knockout loss. I know he lost to Darren Till and Robbie Lawler and Masvidal, but for some reason, those fights in my mind, he took a lot less damage. I mean, he lost to Till pretty quick, but the Lawler fight was fairly competitive, and the Masvidal one, he had just taken way too fast after the Matt Brown fight. I really worry about Cowboy in this one, though. He, doesn't do well against southpaws at all. They brought up an MMA on Point video, and it was about fighters' kryptonites, and Cowboy has 2 or 3. He's not great in the big moment. He doesn't take body shots all that well, and he's not great against southpaws. Anthony Pettis is amazing at hitting people in the body, can switch between orthodox and southpaw flawlessly, and I just think those 2 things together, he's just a terrible matchup for Cowboy. No matter how this fight goes, whether they're both in their primes or they're both past their primes, I just think Pettis is a really hard puzzle for Cowboy to solve.
And both of these guys with a lot of miles on their odometers. I mean, Anthony Pettis, he's only 33 years old. Cowboy coming in at 37, and it's been weight cutting, not weight cutting, and of course you're gonna have to cut weight regardless for 170 pounds. But Anthony Pettis in this one, I still believe him to be a bit of a fresher fighter. You could counter me and say, hey, the Nate Diaz fight was not close, and the Carlos Diego Ferreira fight, which I'm pretty sure we'd both pick Ferreira to win that. I picked Ferreira, but regardless, he's on an absolute heater right now and a tear, and it seems to be his time at 155 pounds. But in this one, I just see a clear path to victory for Anthony Pettis. In terms of the odds, Pettis coming in a -145 favorite to Donald Cowboy Cerrone's +120. Over on Tapology at 642 votes. The fans seeing it a little bit differently than the odds makers. 53% picking Cerrone. This is where it gets interesting. 60% predicting a decision win for Cerrone. On the opposite side of the coin, 47% taking Pettis. 59% of them predicting a KO or TKO victory for Pettis, similar to their first fight. Again, I see it closer to their first fight. I see a much clearer path to victory for Anthony Pettis. And even in some of the bigger fights that he's had where he's lost, I mean, we can go way back. I mean, he had a 3-fight losing streak at one point, gets a win over Charles Oliveira, and then fights Max Holloway for a title. And that was weird. But even in the fights that he's lost, even the Poirier loss, this and that, Ferguson. He's been fairly competitive. The Ferguson fight for sure. That's what I mean. Fairly competitive, and then he broke his hand. So, I can certainly see a clear path to victory.
So, just last thing from me. The last top-tier guy that both guy beat, I think is really important. Anthony Pettis knocked out Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, a guy who had never been knocked out before up until that point, in a matchup that was really bad stylistically for Pettis, but he was still able to figure out a way to kind of solve the puzzle of Wonderboy. Cowboy, the last top tier guy who he beat was Ali Quinta, and nothing against Ali Quinta, but he has a very basic skill set, especially compared to Anthony Pettis. He's going to box you, and he's going to be really good at counter wrestling and whatnot, and make the fight really ugly. So I do think Pettis is going to win. I think he's going to probably win by finish, unfortunately. I don't know if this is it for Cowboy if he does lose. I think if Pettis loses, he'll probably fight Douglas Lima in like a year maybe, who knows. But I think Pettis is probably going to win by knockout. It hurts me to say.
Maybe we'll see a Pettis reunion over in Bellator. We could see a Cowboy riding off into the sunset. Who knows? But we're really looking forward to it. A lot of great matchups with UFC 249 and a lot of fights coming up in a very short period of time. 3 cards in 8 days. You want to keep it locked in here with Fight Night Picks. Make sure you subscribe below. We don't typically say that, but you're not going to want to miss our videos for UFC 249. The other cards, 2 minutes for the prelims, 2 minutes for the main card, and as always, 5 minutes for both the title fights that we have coming up. And Matt, as we always like to say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.